What piece of advice would you give to moms for each stage of their children's growth?
Yeah, so I think starting out, I think it's super important that moms, especially as their children are babies, that the babies know they are important in the sense of like your child can always have face-to-face time with you. Like they can look you in the eyeballs and you're going to look them back in the eyeballs and they know you're there for them. When our kids were the youngest, the baby, I mean, we had at one point we had 4 kids 5 and under. And at that stage, the whole cell phone craze was not huge yet. And so I didn't have to fight any of that. You had my eyeballs and you knew if I look at my mom, she will listen, she will talk back to me, we can carry on a conversation and she will look at me and I know she knows I'm here and all those things that are so important. But now that's a different story. So I think that would be one big thing. And I think that's kind of not talked about a lot, but very important because they need to know from the get-go, from the very beginning, your little infant is looking around the room, can lock eyes with you and see like, oh, my mom notices me, my mom knows me. And I think also that stems from just C.S. Lewis, The Weight of Glory. It's just literally one of my favorite pieces of literature that talks about the immortal souls and all of that. And I think that stems from that mindset. And moms especially need to have that. That should carry on throughout the stages that you're talking about, but especially when they're young because you're forming that foundation then. If a 2-year-old hasn't had the ability of being able to connect with you on a very personal level and understand that you are kind of a safe space, but also a nurturing space for them, you're not going to capture that down the road as much as you can capture it from the beginning and then foster it all the way through. And so that would be one thing. And then I think the best piece of advice I would say as far as like the stages continue is you yourself are growing and changing. And so the mom, like myself, like my role is changing constantly. And so I'm a complete nurturer 100% of the time at the baby and infant stage. But then they need me less and less and less and less. And that should be the model because you should be training them and teaching them to not need you as much. But then all along the way, understanding, okay, my role is changing because it would be completely awkward if I told a 10-year-old daughter, come on over here now, it's time to brush your teeth, But then moms can tend to do that though in certain aspects and not even know that we're doing it. You know what I'm saying? And so you're doing your job in such a way, especially at the smallest age, to train that, like going back, you're training into them all the time. Be an image bearer, right? And so the training is all geared toward that.
So your husband served as a chaplain in the U.S. military, which meant you spent a lot of time holding the fort with the kids. So looking back, what did that season teach you specifically about motherhood and the role you were playing at home? And then how did that shape your perspective, especially in a culture where mothers are often told it's okay and even expected for moms to be fragile and get easily overwhelmed?
So my husband was in the Army for 10 years. Primarily we're stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, which was, I think, 1,200 miles away from my family. And his family was all in California at the time. I was 20 years old. We had my oldest daughter, who was about a year, and I was 7 months pregnant with my son. So it was like a whole big shift. I was very young mom, had 2 very young children. And I think it was kind of one of those periods in my life where, like, if the Lord didn't plunge me into something like neck deep, I probably would have just stayed very comfortable where I was and just kind of relied on my mother to do a lot of some of the heavy lifting for me. And yeah, so I was just really thankful that God just sort of threw us into this thing, and then it was kind of a sink or swim, and he was so faithful to us, really good to us. There was a lot of theological changes that happened in my husband and I during that period of our life. We were, only married for a few years at that point, and he was gone a lot. And the sovereignty of God was something that both of us were pretty new to at that point. And I can't imagine being in the military without actually holding to the sovereignty of God, because there's just so much where if you actually do just believe that God has ordained all things and for our good and his glory, it's just, okay, then we can do it. We can get through this. It'll be great for us. And it was great for us. It was really a sweet time. We both learned to trust each other, trust God. I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned was to just make a home wherever we are. And a lot of times military wives can be like, we're only going to be here for 2 years, 3 years max. Why should I paint the walls? Why should I, whatever it is, right? Make friends with the neighbors or something. Because I know that we're going to be gone, and it stinks to move. It stinks to have to restart every time you're stationed somewhere different. And I very quickly realized, like, if I want my kids to have traditions and have my kids have memories, I need to make them. I need to make them now. And even if we have to move 6 months from now, that's fine. It wasn't a waste because I have 6 months of memories stored up and banked for my children and my husband and I, you know.
So in 2020, you and your husband attended a psalm sing with the rest of your church, and at that psalm sing, you were actually arrested. So would you mind explaining that story?
Our city officials had put forward a masking and social distancing mandate, and it was to be a peaceful political protest of that order. For whatever reason, they decided to approach us. The officer asked us for our IDs in order to cite us for not obeying the masking order. So I handed my ID over. Mr. Bohnet did not, and he leaned down and said, I don't think that you should give him your ID. I had this great, super uncomfortable moment where I said, excuse me, could I have that back? But you know, the Lord gives grace for every moment, and that's definitely true about that moment. Like he gives it to you in the moment, not necessarily before it. And in the moment that Mr. Bohnet asked me to get my ID back, that I shouldn't have given it to them, sort of this like, well, what's worse, that I disagree with my husband in front of all of these people and in front of this police officer, and he gets taken to jail and I'm left over here having publicly disagreed with him in this uncomfortable situation? Or let's go to jail together. Like, you know, like I'm not sure how this is all going to play out, but you have obviously have some conviction in this moment that I don't understand all the way right this second, but I'm going to go along with you. That'd be a lot better than being like, no, you know. So yeah, and then again, that's was definitely in the moment, given this sort of like, just say yes, sir, and go along. Here we go. So the other person who was arrested was Gabe Wrench, and he and Mr. Bohnet were in the same cell. I was in a separate one because I'm a lady, and they don't keep the genders separate in the county jail. So I was in a cell by myself, and then Mr. Bohnet and Mr. Wrench were together. I did not have any direct contact with them while we were detained. I was the last person, after we were transported, I was the last detainee to be booked and transferred into a cell. So they were already in their cell when I was coming through and being searched and getting prepped for being put in my cell. And I could hear them. They were singing. And it was a really strange, like, I never thought I would be in a situation like this kind of moment where I had my hands behind my back and my forehead up against a wall, hearing my husband and another man singing psalms from somewhere in the depths of, you know. But I'm so grateful for that moment of, like, I was wildly encouraged by that moment. And just a little bolster of courage to go be by myself.
What do you find to be the most rewarding part about writing?
Creating soul food. Yes, I am made to write. Even if I were not to publish another book, I would be writing for my husband and son. I'd be writing a blog for the 5 people who read it, whatever, you know. But when I think about a 12-year-old out there who is probably similar to, I remember being 12 and thinking, I was so picky about books. But I was like, if I can write a book that would have pleased even me back then, I want that. Like, I want books to shape kids and adults, but like especially kids. Like back in 2020, were you guys aware of the psalm sing arrest that happened here in Moscow?
Yes.
I was standing 10 feet away. Like, I literally could have been next if we had kept on singing long enough, because they were just working their way through. And I remember thinking I had not quite finished contemplating my game plan, because I didn't know there would be arrests. I thought citations. And I'm like, I know, I used to work for a lawyer. My dad was a lawyer. I felt super confident and just like, I'm going to stand my ground. But then they're arresting. And I'm like, I literally don't even know the constitutional rights. They weren't clear in my head, but I had to decide very quickly. I was like, I'm descended from French Huguenots. My ancestors fought against Hitler, King George III, and the Viet Cong. I can't move. But some of the big things that informed that that mindset was having read, say, stories of the French resistance or the Dutch resistance in World War II, or reading The Hiding Place when I was 12, reading Lord of the Rings, reading Narnia books, reading all these books where I'm like, I know what to do because I've read so many fictional characters who did the right thing, and real characters, but a lot of fiction. If I can write, I take joy in writing books that it put just like one more brick on the wall in terms of building up someone's conviction in terms of what they should do and who they should be in moments like that. Like the little moments of like getting along with your siblings and obeying your husband and doing all that is so important. But every once in a while, the volume gets turned way up and you have to decide actually whether you're going to move during a public psalm sing or not, And so I was like, well, I like writing those sorts of things. If I can encourage people to love their family more fiercely, to obey God no matter what, to do duty and leave the consequences up to him, then that's worth it.
So I would say that it's like bringing flowers into a home or event. You're adding the wonder and beauty of God's creation into your home. So that's what I think flowers do. And I always want to be careful to make sure that it's like, this is God's creation. Like he made these beautiful flowers, all the textures, all the smells, all the shapes, all the colors, like they're incredible. So I think floral design can really showcase God's creation and beauty to glorify him in that way. And so that would be my mission, to bring beauty and wonder of God's creation into homes or events. But I do think that flowers are underrated, mainly because people are used to like just going to a grocery store and seeing like a tight fist closed rose. And they're like, oh, I hate roses and those are ugly. And I'm like, no, like that. So they have a really narrow view of like this amazing world of flowers and greenery and plants. Like I agree. It inspires.
It does.
Sure. I do think that as Christians, we should have beautiful homes and beautiful gardens and beautiful yards. And it doesn't mean that it has to be perfect or large scale.
Right.
But I do think that like, just as like we want to present ourselves like in a way that honors the Lord, like physically, like it would be the same with our homes and our gardens. They can glorify the Lord, like done for the right reason, for sure. So, and yes, I do think it is part of that dominion mandate. Like this house we bought here in Moscow, the bottom half of our property was just overgrown and brown. There was no life there. And so, I totally reject the world's view on like, oh, you need to let nature take its course and do its thing. Right. Like our backyard was proof of what happens when you just let nature do its thing. Like nature was designed by God for us to care and tend, and to take dominion. And to that was like a very small example, what we did in our backyard of like taking something that was just left to do its thing. But yet when you took man's tending and caring and participation with God's beautiful creation, it can be transformed into a beautiful place. So I definitely think it is part of that dominion mandate for sure.
I think that our hearts hinge towards sin and looking for what we want. And we do have to overcome selfishness our whole lives. You see it a lot in small children. They're playing with toys and one's done with the toy, but as soon as someone else picks it up, they want it. And as adults, we can be very selfish with our time. And so we have to, when we think about hospitality, we have to recognize it's so important to look away from what we want, me, to the needs of others, because we can become absorbed in the constant to-do list of our own lives, where it feels like I have no time for anything else. I'm so busy. And it is true, we do have a to-do list and things that are important. We do have to be very intentional with hospitality and say, if something is put in front of me to do, it may be more important than my to-do list. For example, if you have a friend who has a need, you may just need to drop everything and you're going to help. Or you invite the kids in to babysit the kids, or whatever it is. You have to prepare for the spiritual battle by getting your heart and mind ready to follow the commands that are in Scripture. And one of my favorite verses is to do all things without complaining or grumbling. I said that to my kids over and over and over. No grumbling. all things, even the hard things, even the drudgery, even the hard work to serve others. It's when we talk about having people into your home for dinner, it's not just fun and cupcakes. It is a lot of prep, a lot of, hard work that goes into cleaning and cooking and cleaning up afterwards. And so even through that, no grumbling, no complaining, don't feel sorry for yourselves. Our culture constantly wants us to think about me time. What are my needs? I need things, and is a time for rest, but we need to be joyful in our service to others and give abundantly with love and gladness. The Bible instructs. Yes, and he often puts opportunities in front of us to practice. When the disasters happen or you're feeling a little stressed, stress is rising, those are opportunities for you to grow. And they come all the time. Something's going to go wrong or something's going to be delayed or, company's walking in 5 minutes and all of a sudden you realize that the pot is not boiling and it was supposed to boil 10 minutes ago or whatever. And you have to learn how to be who you're supposed to be in that moment.
One of the ways that you serve your family and your church is through Hobbit parties. So what started that tradition and how has it grown over the years?
We started this years ago. My husband was a professor in another state, and we were kind of working with the college-age students, maybe young adults, I can't remember at the time, but they went to the school that he taught at. And we would do readings, like monthly readings, with a themed dinner. It was in September, and we were reading a Tolkien essay, and so we decided to have a little Hobbit dinner, and that was kind of the genesis of it. And then for years, it would just be like my sister and my family, and we wouldn't even do it every year. We would wear the costumes and make all the really delicious foods. It was so fun that we thought, I think some other families would enjoy this. So some other families started joining, and then eventually so many people were interested, and it was getting to be a bit much for us to do on our own, that the church and other people in the church were also throwing their own. So somebody had the idea that we just make it a joint function so that the church would get the venue, provide some basics, and then basically my sister Lori and I have a twin sister. She and I do a lot of these things together, and she and I donate quite a bit. We over time have, bought enough, say, chargers to set the table, that kind of a thing. We have lights and candles. So it's a joint effort now with the church, and it's really just become a lot of people's favorite event of the year. We dress up. We all feel like we're going to the Shire side. And then we string our banner. We do the dancing. Tables are just glittering and beautiful. Last year, I think my daughter and her friend made these little tiny, just almost like a fortune cookie, but it's a riddle. And there was a riddle on everybody's, which is very on theme hobby.
Yes. Wow.
We do
what a neat idea.
Also little gift bags because the traditional for hobbits is to give away gifts on your own birthday.
Yes.
We have done fireworks. Traditionally, we did a kind of a treasure hunt for the kids. So, and they have to fight an orc. Somebody will wear a cape and bring a sword, and it's a thing. And then the girls had to put together a flag. And then once the girls brought forth the flag, then they would defeat the orc. And then everybody would get a ring and they would throw it into the fire pit. So that would be the end of it. And then at the end, we give out their little gold bags. And then everybody else's are on the table. The costumes are always beautiful, just beautiful. The girls are so lovely. And the guys with their sharp vests. We do a whole setup for flower crowns. And the boys, we make swords for them. It's a night of beauty.
I'm sure Tolkien would appreciate it
I
very
hope
much. I'm sure you would have a blast.
Yeah, he would, huh?
In America today, it seems that women have lost the creativity of using spices while they are cooking. One way that this is seen is in our reliance on ready-made spice blends sold at the grocery stores. When and why do you think that began, and was it a simple reliance on the ease of things like spice blends or something else entirely?
I think there's a combination of reasons.
Okay.
So when this began, to my knowledge, and I just had to think back to when I was writing about this, during the colonial era of the British Empire, Brits developed a taste for curry. Well, there is no spice called curry powder. That's a spice blend, right? They tried to replicate that curry powder, that curry blend. And because it takes a lot of skill and a lot of experience to know how to tweak that, curry powder came into being, and you could buy tins of curry powder. So that's, to my knowledge, the first instance that I'm aware of where there was a spice blend available, where you, instead of buying individual spices and blending them yourselves. I think in post-World War II, after the women had entered the workforce and stepped away from the home for a while, there was a desire to, they saw that there were some liberties from the so-called drudgery of the kitchen, and they did not want to let go of that. They wanted to have more freedom to be outside of the kitchen. And so a lot of convenience foods started to come to the forefront, TV dinners and things like that. A lot of factories, from what I understand, that were used in the military efforts for production of things that the military needed were converted to convenience food factories. So there was this desire to not be a slave to the kitchen. There was the repurposing of those facilities. And then also, I think for modern times, like right now, one of the challenges in setting up a household is buying all of those spices, curating a collection of spices where if you're reading a recipe, I don't have cardamom, or what on earth is an Aleppo pepper, or even basic things like cinnamon or ground ginger. Those little tins are expensive if you're trying to build a pantry. And I think a lot of times people are just kind of thrown into needing to get started, and it's just easier to buy a spice blend. And it's kind of a shame because you do take away your ability to adjust it to your taste. And then eventually, as we keep shifting from ingredients to processed foods or packaged foods, we're losing the knowledge of how to actually blend the spices, how to toast the spices, how to bloom the spices, how to grind the spices with a mortar and pestle, or whatever it is. And if it always just comes to you as, this is a Montreal steak seasoning, or here's a McCormick packet of chili seasoning, it's a mystery pouch to you. And you might be able to make chili with that chili seasoning pouch, but you certainly wouldn't be able to do it without some additional education.
Do you think it would be beneficial for us to kind of go back to where we grow herbs and things to put into our food?
Absolutely. Yes. And really, there's almost no excuse for it not now, because you can buy them in the grocery store in little pots. In the winter, if I can't grow basil in my garden in the winter, so I go to Trader Joe's and get the ones that are already growing, and I snip my herbs off of that. But if you've even just got a front porch that you can put a pot on, and you can stick herbs in that pot, I always tell people, if you can't grow anything else in your garden, grow herbs, because they're very expensive to purchase kind of fresh varieties at the grocery store, as far as that come in the little clamshells. And it's very hard to get them at their peak. I had to cut down my rosemary plant of many years last year, and it was painful for me to have to buy fresh rosemary after having bushels of it for years. So if just a little bit of space and a tiny bit of care, you can have fresh herbs right at your fingertips.
So do you think that part of maybe why the moving away from being creative with the spices is why we don't really have a culture as far as food goes in America?
Once the society starts forgetting how to do things, if there's an easier option, they're probably going to take that option.
So in a broad focus view of women's ministry in the church, there is a side that gives the view that only women are qualified to teach women, which is obviously wrong. And then there's the other side in which women only get together for cookie swaps. Therefore, when we say the words women's ministry, what do you think that should look like? Or do you think there should even be such a thing as a women's ministry?
Yeah, that is a huge question. I think we actually have it in Spanish. For those who speak Spanish, we have the dangers, like an episode that it's called The Dangers of Women's Ministries. And it is truly, like we've seen it in many churches in which we kind of grew up, my sister and I, in many churches in the evangelical world. Like the women's ministry becomes an idol, actually, that is taking women out of their homes. We were just talking about it because we saw a little blurb on social media by this huge women's ministry that they are they normally do faithful and teach good scripture, good words, like submit to your husband, love your kids, like that sort of. But they put a lot of emphasis on the women's ministry, and it was very interesting because their little post was about how to bring more women to serve in the women's ministry if everyone is tired, like if they are, and we see that as a problem because they are looking for ways to still bring more women to the women's ministry. And what is the women's ministry? It's just like teaching each other and doing all this work that is just face to face and taking almost the role of the pastor, they start becoming like a little women pastor to these women instead of women going to their husbands or even teaching them, instead of the husband going to her own husband to ask the women, like to their own husband or dad to ask the first of questions, they go to the other women. And then this starts this network of like, only we can understand each other and only we can help each other because we are women. And then they are pushing the idea of like, if you really love Jesus, then you would want to come and serve food here for the whatever thing it's going to happen at church. But then, the women leave their family and then their homes are really falling apart because they are just going and serving, quote unquote, in their churches. So I think it's just more important to, like, the way we phrase it here in our church is the ministry of women. And I think that is just a totally different shift that is so helpful because it's like the ministry, like the way women minister to each other and to the church is different than a women's ministry than what, we normally think. And so women, we minister to each other and, like by bringing meals to those who are, sick, who just had a baby, by praying for each other, by, helping get the kids, or I can keep your kids, or just so many ways, hosting. I mean, it's different, baking bread and then just bringing it in. It's really amazing the ways that we can do it, and finding jobs are ways in which we can encourage one another to teach and each other new skills that will help us to be better at what God has called us to be.
There were so many throughout history, women have had to be exceptionally strong. And I think that it is a huge gift that we don't have half of our children dying from childhood illnesses, and that I don't have to, cart water from the creek every day to wash my clothes. I'm really thankful for that. But there is something about the revolution of the 20th century when women were given a lot of gifts in the form of technology to assist us in our homemaking and the raising of our children and their health and wellness, all of that then for whatever reason, instead of us being like, great, now what else can I do? Okay, that's taken care of. I don't have to spend 3 hours on clothing every day. So instead, what more can I do? Instead, we sort of had these like the housewives who I think, you get the stereotype of the ones that were like, well, I guess there's nothing else for me. So I will just, eat bonbons and watch television, or I will just like it just seems like we sort of scaled down instead of scaling upward. And so I think that's something that we as women, and I try to encourage women a lot about this, we have an incredible ability to be fruitful and to have that spill out past our homes and into society. And so, the prayer in scripture is, Lord, enlarge our boundaries, right? Like that's something that I think women could really do more of, is just say, okay, and sometimes it's like, if you have 8 kids, if you have 6 kids, if you've got a lot of little kids at home, then that is your boundaries enlarged. Congratulations. You don't have to try to spill out anymore. You've got a great host here to work with. But if you are like, for me, for instance, my kids are 10, 12, and 14, and it would be weird if I was still trying to stay where I was when they were little. If I wasn't saying like, okay, I've got the kid part. I mean, it's crazy busy, but I've got that. Like, I can do this. So Lord, enlarge my boundaries. Give me something else. And then waiting to see what he puts in front of you and then doing it cheerfully. Like that, I think, is another thing, is social media will frequently tell women, like, this is really hard for you, and you should spend more time feeling sorry for how hard this is and how thankless this job is. And all of that is actually mental work that's just kind of poisonous, because then you're spending a lot of time being like, feeling sorry for yourself. I can't possibly do any more. And so that's something that I think we should be trying to cultivate, is like, okay, I have so many great gifts, and also maybe I should spend less time on my phone, and maybe I can see what else I can do with my time and energy to bless other people. And that's the weird way the Lord works, is he's like, here's another gift, and it's heavy. Here's another thing for you to do, and it's hard. And that's actually a glory and a great way to stay out of trouble.
First is it's a bonding experience. When you have a child in your lap and something in front of you that you're both giving attention to, it creates a sense of just love and appreciation together. You're both appreciating something. But it's also very important that children hear your voice. And not just your voice, but reading beautiful things. You're going to be saying things and reading words that they have no idea what you're talking about. They've never heard that word before, and that's okay. You're exposing them over and over to language. And I'm also very passionate that what you're reading to your kids shouldn't be garbage. It shouldn't be junky. It should be beautiful. We pick things that are long, that have long sentences, that have rich vocabulary, because we're building something. We're not only building an educational foundation, but we're also really ordering their affections. We are shaping what they desire and long for, because eventually you might be asking your child to read Jane Austen. You might be asking them to read Milton. And if they're not accustomed to reading or hearing long sentences with vocabulary that they might not know right off the top, it's going to be a big jump for them. But not only is the language important, but what they look at is important too. The art and the illustration it needs to be beautiful. And beauty is objective. Reading from a young age is extremely important. And then as you're handing books off, as they become, better at reading, you don't want to hand them garbage, because you've already spent so much time giving them beautiful books to read or reading aloud to them. Now let's hand them things that continue to be beautiful, where the language is maybe harder than they're used to. Or even if it's not harder than they're used to, it's still virtuous and beautiful and not overly simplified. So it's incredibly important that you start from a very young age reading excellent books to your kids. I guess if you think about it this way, when you first start feeding a baby foods, you want to give them foods that you hope that they'll eat as a grown-up, because you're trying to create a desire for certain tastes. It's the same with literature, and it's the same with art. So when you're putting beautiful things in front of them, they're going to think about those beautiful things. So when we read to our kids, they internalize it, and they can see sometimes themselves as the characters, or they can see how maybe they might have done it differently. And this is what's sparking imagination, when they start to see themselves as, or when they can think of, how might that character have done things differently? Or how could they have, if they had changed it just a little bit, would the outcome have been different? And that's their imagination really taking off. So it's incredibly helpful to have books that spark that in your kids, so that I think a better way of putting it is it creates a sense of wonder, where they wonder, I wonder if, or I wonder what. And when they begin to wonder, then they can test themselves as well.
How should fathers be raising their daughters when it comes to thinking through choosing a spouse?
Know, love, and trust the standard of God's word. So we've hammered this again and again and again, but once again, this is part of it. So, and the standard of God's word is marry so you're looking for a spouse, marry whomever you're with, as long as they're in the Lord. Okay. But what does it mean that the person is in the Lord? And it seems like at this point in a lot of circles, it's like, well, they're self-professing Christians, and they're male, and they've always been male. They've not transitioned to be male. So they've always been male. And they claim to love the Lord. And so, and I'm a married wish, so proceed, have at it. And I just think that's a really foolish approach to marriage. And the reason it's a very foolish approach to marriage is because the Bible then tells us how you can know if somebody is in the spirit, right? How they know if they're actually a child of God. And so, 1 John is written, write these things that you may know you have eternal life. And so there are aspects that the scripture says. And so one of the key aspects in Galatians is there's fruit of the Spirit. And so walk through the fruit of the Spirit in a very careful way, right? So if I'm trying to raise up daughters who are looking at this, I want them to know and love and trust the standard of God's word. And in that, the Bible tells them what a Christian should look like. And so let's just go through those. Do you love, right? So if love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, right? So if those are there, so let's just take love. Do they love, and do they love the things that God loves? Therefore, if you love the things that God loves, you should hate the things that God hates, right? That is pretty simple. And so start looking at the person's life. Do they love the things of God? So do they have joy? Do they laugh? Are they joyful? Do they have a good sense of humor, right? I mean, these are key things we need to be looking at regarding. Now, it's not to say that we're determining whether or not the person's saved, but if you're going to entrust yourself to their care, they're going to be your head. Do you trust them leading you? Right? And so let's look at that. The love, joy, and we'll stop here. We won't go through all 9 of them, but peace. Are they on Zoloft? Are they anxious all the time? I just think, man, that's not a good sign and a good indicator that God is indwelling them, that he is causing them to walk in his statutes and commandments, as Ezekiel 36 says. And so when I get to Ezekiel 36, that's the passage that Jesus is referencing when he talks to Nicodemus about being regenerate, about being born again, right? Being born of water and spirit. Where is that in the Old Testament? It's in Ezekiel 36. And why do we know it's in the Old Testament? Because Jesus tells Nicodemus, how are you a teacher in Israel and not know these things? Well, if he's teaching Israel, what is he teaching them? The Old Testament. And so it's got to be in the Old Testament. So water and spirit, where is it? Ezekiel 36, the new birth. And so besides, if the person's anxious and worried all the time, right? And so Philippians tells you what to do about it. Philippians chapter 4 tells you how to address anxiety. And so those are indicators of like examining someone's walk with God. And so if I'm going to try to help my wife think through, or help my daughters think through choosing a spouse, then that's the case. And so do they know, love, and trust the standard of God's word?
I would say a beautiful custom home is most exciting to me because our homes shape us. I think Winston Churchill said that. We build them and then they shape us. And whenever I'm designing a home, I think of the people that are going to live there and how they're going to live and all the experiences they're going to have in that house. I mean, you think of your meals together, your holidays, and we try to find clients who are really wanting to design legacy custom homes. You know, they're thinking long term, I want this to last, and I really value that. So I think that my favorite is passing off plans to a client who's going to build a beautiful family home, and they're going to live in it for many years to come.
So what would you say is your mission, first of all, with the business and then with each project that you take on?
Our mission with our work is to reflect God's beauty in architecture. So that's a pretty simple mission, but it does drive us. There's objective beauty, and that has been lost in our world in so many different industries. And so we really want to, we don't always just want to be going back to, the old stuff is better, but you do look back and what has stood the test of time, right, and honoring the good proportions, balance, symmetry, and what do people really like to see instead of just thinking function. I think good architecture pairs both. But so I think that is our mission, to do that, and it comes out in a lot of different ways.
So what do you think then drives where we're only talking about functionality versus beauty? What do you think, particularly in architecture, separated those two?
There's a lot of things that happened in the mid 20th century that dramatically changed how we had lived for all of time, and we became, there was you can't point to one person, but there's a lot of people that were instrumental in that change. William Levitt was a real estate developer who really pushed a car-driven society, and so a lot of suburban neighborhoods now, you see them and you see, well, what does look like our priority? Well, obviously all the garages are in the front of the house. We show where we put our our money where our mouth is, and every garage is facing the street. The front doors are way pushed back. There's tiny windows. It's dark so that people can have privacy. And, I really do think that, your theology is shown in your architecture, and we've become, worried about what other people see in our lives. We're trying to hide, or we just want it to be easy instead of thinking, well, how is this actually shaping my life? And, so many decisions in design shape how you live. So, for example, early on in our business, maybe we were working with maybe a larger variety of clients because we were just kind of taking on whatever work that we could get. So all sorts of people were coming to us, and not necessarily, now I think people know who we are and they know what they're getting. So they come to us for that. But back then, people might be like, oh, I don't need a dining room table because we just eat at the island. Or we want, every child to have their own bedroom so that, they can have their own space. And we want to work with clients who have, a similar lifestyle in a sense that we do, because I think that it's a wonderful way to live where dining rooms are big and, you are thinking about hospitality, you're thinking about natural light, you're not necessarily putting your TV in the most prominent spot in your house. And so all those things, your beliefs come out in the little ways that you live in your home and how you design your home.
Within the broader world of antiques, what do you think gives heirlooms their significance and meaning?
To me, it's all about the story. And so I have a lot of family pieces that I have inherited over the years. Like I mentioned, my great-grandmother's china. I have my grandmother's sterling flatware. I have her sideboard. And so those items actually take precedence in my home, even if they aren't quite the right color or quite the right scale, because they have a story with them. So I will preference those items, even if a decorator might say the scale's off, the color's off. I'm like, sorry, it's my great-grandmother's. It's saying it has a story. And so I think that's part of it. My grandmother had the habit of every Christmas giving my mom a family piece and writing a little note about it. This was your great-grandmother's, this is the background. And then my mom has done that with me as well, which is how I ended up with my grandmother's sterling. One Christmas, she just decided now is the time. And so, I think it's a connection to the past. It's honoring the past, honoring the efforts and the works of those who came before us. And just holding on to those things for continuity so we don't act like the past doesn't matter.
Which is very important nowadays that people are trying to rewrite the past. It's very important to keep that and pass the stories along.
Right. And some of those stories are, the stories are the truth, even if the truth sometimes makes us a little bit uncomfortable. But we ought not ignore what the truth of the past is. And so things from those different eras kind of keep us honest.
We need to remember as moms that our job isn't to create our own little kingdom. And it's hard because when they're all little and you're having more babies and you're figuring things out and you're making your plans and everyone's kind of working together and you've got your little kingdom, and that's what your home is. The whole point of having the children under your care and giving them that parenting and discipleship is for them to leave and do it themselves. So all of that parenting should be for the purpose of equipping them to move on and do it themselves. And then it can feel like your home exploded, and we can get emotional and distracted and distraught over that. But really, all the little pieces flew and planted. They were all seeds that are now growing, magnificent plants. I didn't really plant them. Like I cultivated they kind of grew off of me, right? Some seeds sprung out of me and the wind took them and planted them, and now they're plants that are producing seed. And that's actually amazing. It's actually incredible. And if we get too wrapped up in our home being our thing where we control everything and everyone, we miss that opportunity to delight in what God does with those seeds, that He sends other places to do other things. It's not our mission to control their lives.
So why do you think that the controlling, mothers wanting to control is such an issue? Right? What do you think causes that in the mom that wants to just, keep her babies all close?
Well, it is kind of an inherent piece of motherhood, because you kind of have to have all your ducklings all around you to keep them all alive at first. And so I think especially because women are very isolated and age segregated, they don't look up for the long view and they don't realize it's going to change. And you're investing all this time and energy into setting up your home routines, into figuring parenting out. And you're really invested in that. And that's a great thing. But if our focus is narrow and only on figuring those things out, then suddenly that season is over and we're just completely caught off guard. And the only tactics we've ever thought about or practiced are obey, I have made this decision, get in line. That's how we managed a bunch of little kids. And we never thought about they aren't going to be little kids forever. They aren't little kids now. And I don't have any more tactics at my fingertips. And I've not been watching older moms. I've not been around older moms. And I didn't even see this coming. And I don't know what to do. And so that's why I do think it's super important for us to be following like Titus 2.
Yes.
Women need older women around them. We do fall to pieces if we're isolated. And a form of isolation can be only being in a peer group. And definitely it can be only watching people that you like on Instagram. That does not count because you need to see the messes. You need to be involved in people's more holistic real lives. And it's not realistic or proper for people to be sharing all of that online. That can't be where you look for it. It needs to be in your local church.
Yes.
And the people in your local church will not look or act as pristine and lovely as the Instagram people.
Yes, that's true.
But they are the people that God has placed in your life for your good and for their good. And so you can rely on that and ask God to use that.
So, speaking of flourishing, there is a beautiful aroma of robust, biblical, and competent femininity in the culture where you and your husband live. Did someone teach or model that example of biblical femininity for you, or was it something you learned to cultivate through the reading of the Bible or books?
Okay, so you have to remember, it's 50 years that we've been here and married. Our church is 50 years old. It started right when we got married. So it's been generations, okay? It's been generations. It wasn't like a how-to kit, let's see what we can come up with. But I think that there has been marriages here that have borne fruit over many generations. When our church first started, a lot of new believers, young, fresh out of college, young couples, some of them moved away, and it's funny how many got divorced from that early time. They moved away and got divorced. And so it wasn't instant. And then I guess I would just say that gradually, like yeast in the loaf, it's just a slow process. So women who were committed to submitting to their husbands, being homemakers, investing themselves in the project here. I went to Logos and started teaching, investing in the project, but my children were there. So that was the motivation. But over the years, and so many of those children that grew up then are now parents with children, getting the same education. And it's compounding, but it really does take generations. So my grandson is teaching at Logos. Now, I'm just using Logos as an example because that's what we did. But my grandson, he graduated from Logos. Crazy. He has a master's. He's teaching there, and he has a little boy, a baby. But, it's just, wow. And then our daughter Becca taught there, and our son is on the school board. I mean, it's just generational. And some of the students I had that were in my kids' classes are now elders in our church and on the school board. And they're doing things in Moscow. They've started businesses and doing all kinds of things. So there are all these ladies that we were sorting things out in the early years, how to minister to people that were coming, new and different things and book studies and different things. They're now grandmas with kids in college and beyond. And so it wasn't like a how-to kit that we opened up and presto. It's just God's faithfulness over generations. And there's still just as much work to do as there ever has been, because there are always weird things that come up. And, where did this come from? What is happening? And some of it is repeat, like, oh yeah, we saw that back in the 80s. Here it is again. So just being consistent, faithful, doing what's in front of you and not looking for something else to do and not wandering from place to place, trying to find it.
Right.
Steady progress, not lurching, not running off, just sticking with it.
So the element that would hopefully be a takeaway for our guests, whether they're Christian or an unbelieving people, would be just, of course, the element of joy. Christmas, of course, like you said, it's such an
important time in the Christian's life, because what we're celebrating is not a momentary event that occurs in history, but one that is rooted in eternity and it's not temporal, it's eternal. And so there ought to be the weight of the joy that comes along with that reality, that we're not just acting as though this is going to be a momentary high and we're trying to get as much from it as we can because it's passing. It's a joy that's rooted in the foundation of we actually get to celebrate this year after year after year, and knowing that this thing, that the supernatural breaking through into the natural world is our eternal reality. And it's the reason for our celebration. So joy for sure. I asked my kids about these, so it was interesting.
Oh, fun.
It was great. And so it's interesting to hear my kids' answers. And some of them were brief, but I also thought they were also pretty important. We actually celebrate all 12 days of Christmas also. And so my daughter said, that all 12 days should be celebrated. Like that's a unique feature. And I think that because, again, we're talking about liturgies and calendars and observing a church calendar and creating rhythms based on the eternal truths and the things that we celebrate. Do you think it's important that I think unbelievers would be surprised, like, wait, what? You don't just celebrate for a day and then take your tree down,
Yes.
We elongate the celebration until, of course, Epiphany. And the other is inclusivity. We've always celebrated Christmas, not just with our family. Actually, we celebrate Christmas with our church family more so, we have over the years. So we are always going to have people in our home for Christmas, the Christmastide.
Oh, I love that.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
That's got to build such a wonderful like-mindedness. And if you're all participating in that together, that maybe they haven't been as intentional about celebrating Advent or whatever, you'd really just be sharing the joy and the like-mindedness to then, all right, let's go take ground in the new year.
Yeah.
I love that. So what would you say to someone who thinks that because unbelievers have taken Christmas as a holiday and made it all about Santa Claus and presents, that we should not celebrate it at all?
Well, there's this quote attributed to Luther that says the abuse of a thing is not an argument against its proper use. And I think that can be applied in this situation.
Yep.
This was very interesting because, again, when my son answered and I was sharing this, he's like, well, it's okay that, pagans or unbelievers are celebrating. And of course, they're going to celebrate in a way that errs. You know what I'm saying? Because they actually aren't celebrating the right reason, or they don't understand the reason for the celebration. So the celebration that they have is going to look different. And I think this goes back to the concept of like worshiping, right? We celebrate because we worship Christ, our King. And so that worship is focused or centered on his work in coming and taking on human flesh. And so unbelievers are worshipers too. They just don't know what to worship or how to worship rightly. And so the commercialization of the unbeliever should not affect our festivities, actually. It should actually cause us to double down in our celebrations and be the example or model of what the true celebration and why we are truly celebrating. We should be more intentional about demonstrating that truth. I think the danger in Christians taking on that, walking away from or giving over of our celebration to unbelievers because they don't do it rightly, the danger is that you're going to provoke your kids to jealousy. Seeing what seems like festivity or celebration, you're going to cause them to have interest or desire that. And what you're causing is them to desire like scraps at pagans' tables instead of the feast that God has given us. And so you have to be really careful not to turn your kids into kids that want scraps instead of the real feast.
That's a very good point. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us on this episode of the Feminine Glory podcast. This is the part of the podcast where we're supposed to tell you to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel or just subscribe to Apple Podcasts, but particularly YouTube. So there you go. You can smash those buttons and
or you don't have to. If you find us boring, if you don't like us, you can just not do that and not visit this podcast again. It's up to you. Would you rather to listen or not to listen, to subscribe or not to subscribe?
That's the question.
Yep. So you can pick. We'll leave it open.
Yes.
You can subscribe. We like YouTube.
Yeah.
Because it hosts our podcast. So
and YouTube would like us to ask you to do this.
So there you go. We asked. So you can do that. Do that what you will.
We'll see you on the next one.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
Who knows? All right. Bye.
Bye.
Guys.